let's just do a little bit quick on Syria right now, because it seems to me, by every estimation, it's no longer a country under any circumstances that we consider a functioning country. And it seems to me that we're, at this point, also basically just in a proxy war, we, the United States, pretty much in a proxy war with Russia. Am I completely oversimplifying it at this point?
Well, no. I mean, it's not quite a proxy war with Russia. It's something else. Look, the truth is that Syria is the end of Syria, the end game in Syria, as it were, which I think we probably are in now, is the end game that Assad and the Iranians always wanted, which is Assad against ISIS. Because if it's Assad against ISIS, they know that the world will not back ISIS. And, earlier this year, Assad was interviewed by Jeremy Bowen of the BBC, and, Assad, talked about the opposition as these terrorists of ISIS. And, some years ago, he wouldn't have been able to get away with that so much. He still can't completely get away with that line now, but some years ago, he certainly couldn't. I knew and worked with some members of the Syrian opposition more than 15 years ago, I think, to begin with, and knew that there were people who were very good, who wanted their country not to be run by the Bashar al-Assad family forever, and wanted Syria to be the great country it could be. All of their hopes have gone. Most of those people are dead now. And Assad has got what he wanted. The Iranians have got what they wanted. No one will back ISIS, quite rightly. So in the end, will allow Assad to remain in power. Look, this is, to some extent, what happens when we don't take any interest and don't really get involved. I've always been against us intervening in any major way in Syria for one reason in particular, which was that I always said that after Iraq and Afghanistan, we should realize that we clearly don't have the desire, the willpower, or produce the people anymore in your country or mine who want to spend, 20 or 30 years in this country, governing bits of it, helping with infrastructure problems or anything else. We're good at going in and doing the first phase, but we're no good at the follow-up, and we should realize that. And in the meantime, not be responsible for any country's collapse whose nation building afterwards we really don't want to do.
So you're not a very good neoconservative then, I think, because wouldn't all the people that are going to label you neoconservative would say you should be for all these things?
Well, the people who do the labels never listen to what you actually say.
So what should we do then, basically? I mean, without really belaboring Syria, because I know we could talk about it for 2 hours. I mean, at this point, watching this country just collapse and Russia fill the vacuum, what should the role of the West be?
I don't think we have much of a role now. As I say, the opportunity for backing the good guys, that window closed very early in the conflict. The truth is that the future of Syria is not going to be in American hands. It probably never was. It's certainly not and never was going to be in British hands. Iran will win in Syria. Russia will win in Syria. Bashar al-Assad will win in Syria. And everyone else, including most of the Syrian people, lose. That's the end game. That's the result.
Yeah. How much
you may like it or not like it, but that's the result.
Yeah. I mean, I basically agree with you on that. How much of this do you think is that it's very obvious that that Obama just wanted out of this part of the world? He just simply wanted out, and the way we left Iraq and everything else, I was against us going into Libya. I was against Syria, all of this stuff, but to your earlier point, it seems like even if we do something, everyone hates us, and if we don't do anything, everyone hates us. Is that the ultimate irony here?
Well, it's an irony. There are many others as well. But yes, I mean, it is true that when America acts, it gets blamed, and when it doesn't act, it gets blamed. And sometimes that blame is worth listening to, and sometimes it isn't. I mean, to some extent, you have to listen to who it comes from, I would say. When people who criticize America or her allies or a country like Britain do so as helpful critics, you can usually tell. And when people criticize America or Britain or any other country and they're speaking as enemies, you can also tend to tell. So, there are lots of things that we can learn from this period. I would think it would be very regrettable if America decided that the response to all of this would be that America would decide, well, no one ever loved us anyway, so we're going home. You won't have America to kick around anymore. Sort of Lacrimose, Jeb Bush-like line. I hope that America doesn't take that view, but Obama. As I hope everyone also learns the lesson of Obama on this. I mean, Obama's predecessor found all sorts of ways to mark out the Middle East, but Obama has as well, wholly new ways in some ways. Obama was meant to be the president who brought the troops home and brought peace in the Middle East, and he did a bit of that, but he certainly hasn't brought peace any more than the waters receded and all that other stuff. It's been a very. I think the Obama presidency, at the end of it, people will realise. Not that his predecessors were terrific and that he wasn't or anything, but that the noblest aspirations can all go wrong in wholly different ways.
Yeah. Doesn't that Egypt speech, the speech he gave in Cairo, which really was the reset, doesn't that seem like not just a different time? It almost feels like it was from a different planet at this point, right?
As did the Russia reset, and as does the Russia reset now. After 9/11, Dick Armitage famously said to the Pakistani ambassador who was saying, the usual guff about, we're not, ISI and so on don't know, about Al-Qaeda and all this sort of stuff. Dick Armitage was said to have banged the table and when the Pakistani ambassador said, there's a lot of history. Armitage said to bang the table and say, history starts today. It's a very noble threat, but it's never true. Mm-hmm. History didn't start on 9/11. It didn't start with the beginning of the first Obama administration. I wish we were wiser about this. Anyhow.
Yeah, well, I think in a world of Twitter and Vine and short videos, our attention span just is frayed to the point that people just forget history. People just don't really care about history. So one more quick thing on Syria, and then we'll move on. The refugee situation in Europe, which I'm seeing these videos every day coming out of all sorts of different, from Denmark and Sweden and Germany. It sounds like an absolutely terrible situation. And what I think is most interesting about it is nobody had heard about any of it a month ago. I mean, it basically started a month, maybe 5-6 weeks ago, something like that. Mm-hmm. Before that, it seemed like there was no refugee crisis, and now it seems like an epic refugee crisis.
Well, I don't know. Looked at that from there.
That's here, at least what we were getting mainstream here.
Well, in Britain and across Europe, certainly Southern Europe, it's been going on for a very long time, obviously. And Southern Europeans, the Italians and the Greeks in particular, have been asking for help for a very long time. And if you go, as I did earlier this year, to the island of Lampedusa in the south of Italy, it's nearer to Libya than it is to anything else in Italy, including Sicily. You can see the graves of migrants who tried to get over, going back 15 years or more. So it is quite a long developing story. It's true that every year in recent years, when you get towards the summer months, there's a surge. Obviously, it's easier to cross the waters during those months. This is, by the way, this is such a hugely complex story, and it's one that really we're all getting wrong. It's a classic example of the sort of Twitter age not being really fit for purpose, mm-hmm. Because this is one of the most extraordinary and vast migrations that we've seen, and it's being misunderstood by almost everybody. The majority of the migrants who are coming into Europe are not from Syria. The Syrians comprise a minority of the migrants. You can pick your percentages. Some people think it's now around 20%, some people up to 40%. It varies, obviously, between the points of entry. But the vast majority are coming from all over the world. There are people from Bangladesh. There are people coming from the farther east than that. There are people, the majority, I would think, by my own observation, are coming from sub-Saharan Africa. So when you hear statesmen saying, and pundits and others saying, well, we need to solve Syria, for instance, and then we'll solve the migrant crisis, these people don't know what they're talking about. Even if it was in America or Britain or any other country's gift to solve the humanitarian catastrophe of Syria, mm-hmm. that would only solve a part of the migrant crisis. What's your plan for Eritrea? Has anyone got one? Has anyone thought of one? Can anyone point to Eritrea on a map?
Yeah.
We are so not fit for purpose in rising to this challenge. And all that can happen, I don't know if you saw me to lower the tone somewhat, Benedict Cumberbatch one of my compatriots, was on stage in London the other night, finished a performance of Hamlet, and berated the crowd and berated British politicians for not bringing in enough people. That is the clever, caring thing to say at the moment. We must open our doors. Refugees welcome. Do you know what? In the UK, a recent poll showed only 7% of the British people want immigration into the UK to increase. 7%. It's the same across Europe. People don't mind accepting genuine refugees, but no one knows what to do with the number of refugees, genuine refugees who are coming. And absolutely nobody knows, including Chancellor Merkel, who, having saved Europe in the financial crisis, has now totally floundered on the refugee crisis. Angela Merkel doesn't know what to do. The European Commission just recently tried to force quotas on European countries to take migrants they couldn't and didn't want to take. And as the European Commission issued that, they admitted that that number they were talking about was not fit for purpose because the number was so much higher. What I'm trying to convey is this is a continent-wide catastrophe, which we are at the beginning of. And I think, as I say, we haven't even begun to rise to it. And we're going to see, I think, terrible things. Winter's coming. Sweden is now putting refugees in tents because it's run out of properties. Sweden took the view, let's show the world how generous we are. Let's be, they said, a humanitarian superpower. Now they're going to have to raise taxes. They've got increasing public opinion against them. And the top party in the polls in Sweden, the humanitarian hyperpower of Sweden, is the party that's generally called far right. That's now top of the polls in Sweden.
Yeah,
and we're going to see that everywhere.
Yeah, is that what's coming next? Because that is what I fear, that I think somebody like Benedict Cumberbatch, I think there's some well-intentioned humanistic thing going on here.
Well, I don't know about that, actually. I mean, maybe they just want to look like they're doing that. But if it comes back to a core mistake in our era. If you want to be generous, but don't demand other people to be generous for you. The head of the Scottish Nationalist Party a little while ago said she would be willing to take in a Syrian family. It's months since she said that, and as far as I know, there are no Syrians living with her. One of the top members of the Labour Party said the same thing months ago. So far as I know, she hasn't got a Syrian family in her house. I think this is posturing, and it's not sincere. Because if you said to those people, look at the numbers that are actually coming, and look at the numbers of people who say they want to come, you will realize that it is not only economically but societally unsustainable.
Right. So
you would have to realize that.
Yeah. So under the best of circumstances, bringing these people in would be extremely difficult. And basically what you're saying is we're doing this, or this is being done under the worst of circumstances because there's just simply no controls here.
Well, there's no controls. Nobody knows who's coming. Most people destroy their papers before they get here. Most people pretend to be Syrians, even when they're very obviously not. And the truth is, as I've seen in covering this story in the south of Europe, the truth is that once you're in European waters, you're in Europe, and you never go back. There's no particularly good way. Even when this was at a low point, there was no particularly sophisticated way to work out who was who, and to work out who was genuine and who was an economic migrant. And that whole system is basically broken down now. So once you're in, you're in. And I think this is going to obviously prove a potentially breaking challenge for Europe, because these are Germany's meant to be bringing 1% of its current population in addition every year for the foreseeable future. Who pays for that? Who pays for those people? I mean, I'm not heartless about this. I would like to see everywhere genuine refugees get asylum in countries, hopefully return to their countries and help rebuild them when they're safe again. But I would like genuine asylum seekers to get asylum. But at the moment, the whole thing is so tied up that actually I think that Europe's heart is going to harden towards all of these people. And in that lack of attention to the detail, I think, yes, across Europe, we see a catastrophe starting.
Yeah. What do you make of the Gulf countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, et cetera? I read this morning that the 6 main Gulf countries have taken in 0 refugees.
Yes.
These are their brothers, are they not? I mean, what's going on here?
Brothers in the same way that the Palestinians are their brothers.
So
Yeah.
we'll get to that next.
Well, look, the Gulf state countries bring in no Syrian refugees, and one Kuwaiti official in a recent interview was asked why, and said, an interview in Arabic, it's on the net, said that the reason was because Kuwait, you have to understand, he said, we are very fragile and countries. We can't take in all these people. They are traumatized. They come from a different culture. You know, it's a different culture, Syria. We can't put up with them in the Gulf.
Right, it's much more like Sweden.
So why don't you go to Norway, Sweden, and so on? And you see, it's another thing of people's good instincts being used against them. Europeans don't hear that. What Europeans see is catastrophe. What did we do? We must be responsible. What's our responsibility? We must do this. We must do it even if it breaks us. And over in the Gulf, they're taking in 0 people, and they don't give a damn about it. And frankly, I think they probably find it quite funny that the Europeans have fallen for the idea that this whole catastrophe is the fault of the Europeans.
Yeah, all right. So I do want to move on, but I have to back up for a second. So what do you think in the mind of someone like Angela Merkel? What do you think she's actually thinking? She has to know that it's not sustainable, right? And I get it. She's either trying to have these lofty goals of trying to do something on humanitarian grounds or whatever. But what do you think really is going on in her head? Also knowing that, as you said before, this probably is going to strengthen the far right in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, Germany, it may not actually be possible to solve it, because in Germany, for all sorts of obvious historical reasons, if you say in Britain, I don't know, we might have a migration so large that British culture and British society will basically be over. If you were to say that, well, it's not true at the moment, but I mean, if somewhere down the road you were to say that, you would still get most British people sort of think that, you know, we're a nice guy, we enjoy ourselves as a country, we've been broadly a force for good in the world. They wouldn't want Britain to be over. Germany has a different thing. There are a lot of people in Germany who, for historical reasons and some understandable historical reasons, basically think that German guilt can never be alleviated, and that anything other than the destruction of Germany could never rid Germany of its sins.
Wow.
Now, my own view is that those people may be in the years ahead themselves in a minority. I think it's quite hard to tell young Germans that because of something their grandparents did, they have to abolish themselves as a country or as a society. But they've definitely got the problem harder. Now, you see, you can see that in Angela Merkel's response. Angela Merkel, when she was asked recently at a press conference by a nice German lady who just sort of said, you know, isn't this a problem for our country? And I'm concerned for my country. Was just brushed off by Angela Merkel, as if this woman was some whack job weirdo who'd come from Racistville.
Yeah.
And you see this all throughout. Let me give you one other very quick example. These Pegida protests, which I don't agree with. I'm concerned about them, but I think that they are. They're all sorts of things. They are obviously an anti-Islam protest, but they're also an anti-migration protest and all sorts of other things. But it's a legitimate use of people's time. It's a legitimate political grievance. It needs to have an airing. Angela Merkel uses her New Year message to say that the Pegida protesters have coldness in their hearts. If instead of that she'd said, the Islamists who the Pegida protests are mainly concerned about have coldness in their hearts, and we as Germans must be careful not, in response to this hatred, to become hateful ourselves, then that might be something. But you see, Angela Merkel's problem is she can only deal with secondary problems. She can't deal with the primary ones. I said that would be a final point. Final point.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it, but the other week a fascinating thing happened at the UN in New York. Angela Merkel was sitting next to Mark Zuckerberg for lunch. And unfortunately, Angela Merkel's microphone was hot. Everyone in politics has had a hot mic moment.
Right.
But her mic was still on at possibly the worst moment it could have been for her. I'm amazed it hasn't been picked up more. But she sat down to lunch beside Mark Zuckerberg in September in New York and said, whilst the mic was on, to Mark Zuckerberg, what can we do to stop people writing anti-immigration things on Facebook? And Mark Zuckerberg says, we're working on it. Now, look, I say this as clearly as possible. If you want to create a volcano in Europe, the best way to do it would be to shut down and stop legitimate public feeling about things, and to say that is no good. Saying that you object to the migration on Facebook, it should be stopped. That is the biggest way, the fastest way to make sure the volcano blows out of the side.
Yeah, and it seems so obvious to me that this is what the regressive left has done by labeling everyone who doesn't agree with them racist. They've created a situation where good-intentioned people, liberals, are now finding themselves agreeing on a lot of things with people on the far right who they agree with nothing else on. It's the danger. That's the danger.
I think the fact is that what the left has done in recent years with the term racist has basically ended up denuding the term of having any meaning, and or much meaning anyway. Because if everybody can be called a racist at some point, and generally, or very often at least, for very spurious grounds, it means that you've basically got no terminology left when an actual racist comes along. And I can sort of sense that people just, they're going to end up not caring in the future. I've always said I want this solved. I want this problem, these sort of problems dealt with in order that they're not dealt in the coming decades by Marine Le Pen and the Jörg Haider-ish elements in Austria. But, too few people listen.